Imagine a world where a single man's words could ignite a revolution. Not with swords and shields, but with scrolls and sermons. This man, Paul, stands at the center of one of the most transformative movements in human history. Yet, the Paul we meet in the New Testament is a paradox, a figure of profound complexity and contradiction. To truly understand Paul, we must delve into the stark differences between the Paul of the letters and the Paul of Acts, and explore the revolutionary ideas that shaped early Christianity. The Paul of the New Testament is not a single, static figure, but two distinct personalities: the Paul of the letters and the Paul of Acts. These two portrayals offer radically different perspectives on his role, authority, and mission. The Paul of Acts, as depicted by the author Luke, is a man operating under the authority of the church leaders in Jerusalem, carefully aligning his actions with the broader church. In contrast, the Paul of the letters is a fiercely independent apostle, unafraid to challenge even the most revered figures of the early church. Acts presents Paul as a diplomat, a man who seeks harmony and consensus. One of the most significant events in this narrative is the Council of Jerusalem, described in Acts 15. Here, Paul and Barnabas are sent by the church in Antioch to consult with the leaders in Jerusalem about the status of Gentile Christians. The council, chaired by James, decides that Gentile converts need not adhere to the full Jewish law, but should abstain from certain practices, such as eating meat sacrificed to idols and consuming blood. This decision is presented as a harmonious resolution, where Paul is a respected delegate, but ultimately subject to the authority of the Jerusalem church. However, the Paul of the letters is a far more complex and controversial figure. In his own writings, Paul portrays himself as an apostle in the fullest sense, equal to the original disciples of Jesus. He claims to have seen the risen Christ, a claim that he uses to assert his apostolic authority. This is a bold and audacious assertion, especially since he had not been a follower of Jesus during his earthly ministry. Paul's letter to the Galatians is particularly revealing. He recounts an incident where he confronted Peter, one of the original disciples, over the issue of table fellowship with Gentiles. This confrontation underscores Paul's willingness to challenge even the most revered figures when he believes the truth of the gospel is at stake. Paul's letters also reveal a man who is deeply concerned with the inclusion of Gentiles in the Christian community. He argues that Gentiles are justified by faith in Christ, not by adherence to the Jewish law. This stance places him at odds with those who believe Gentiles must first become Jews before they can be true Christians. Paul's letter to the Romans is a masterful exposition of this theology. He argues that the righteousness of God is available to all through faith in Christ, regardless of whether one is Jew or Gentile. This radical idea of universal salvation through faith alone would later become a cornerstone of Reformation theology. The tension between the Paul of the letters and the Paul of Acts is not just a matter of historical interest. It reflects broader questions about authority, tradition, and the nature of the early Christian community. Acts presents a more unified and harmonious picture. where the Church operates under a clear hierarchy and consensus. The letters, on the other hand, reveal a more dynamic and contentious reality, where apostles like Paul are driven by a deep conviction of their own mission and the truth of their message. One of the most significant aspects of Paul's thought is his concept of justification by faith. This idea, which became central to Reformation theology, asserts that salvation is a gift from God, received through faith in Christ, rather than through adherence to the law. Paul's letters to the Romans and Galatians are particularly influential in this regard. In Romans, he argues that no one can be justified by the works of the law, because all have sinned and fall short of God's glory. Instead, justification comes through faith in Christ, who is the ultimate expression of God's grace. In Galatians, Paul's argument is even more strident. He contends that the promise to Abraham, and by extension to all his descendants, is based on faith rather than the law. This is a revolutionary idea, as it suggests that the law, which was once seen as the means of salvation, is now secondary to faith. Paul's personal experience of struggling with the law and his eventual realization that faith in Christ is the true path to righteousness is a recurring theme in his letters. The new perspective on Paul, developed by scholars like E. P. Sanders, James Dunn, and N.T. Wright, offers a fresh interpretation of Paul's theology. This perspective emphasizes the historical context of Paul's writings and the specific issues he was addressing. Paul was not primarily concerned with individual salvation in the modern sense, but with the inclusion of Gentiles in the Christian community. His arguments about justification by faith were aimed at resolving the tension between Jewish and Gentile Christians and establishing a common basis for their unity in Christ. Paul's letters also reveal his deep concern for the moral life of his readers. While he emphasizes that faith in Christ is the basis of salvation, he does not suggest that ethical behavior is unimportant. In fact, his letters are filled with exhortations to live a life of love, peace, and righteousness. In Romans, he summarizes the commandments by saying that love fulfills the law. This emphasis on love and moral living is a counterpoint to the idea that faith alone is sufficient for salvation. The new perspective has been influential in reshaping how scholars and theologians understand Paul. It has challenged the traditional interpretation of Paul as a theologian focused on individual salvation, and has highlighted his role in addressing the practical and theological issues of the early Christian community. This perspective emphasizes the importance of context and the specific issues Paul was addressing, rather than reading his words through the lens of later theological debates. In conclusion, the Paul of the letters and the Paul of Acts are two sides of the same coin, each offering a unique perspective on the early Christian movement. The Paul of the letters is a radical, independent apostle who challenges tradition and asserts his own authority, while the Paul of Acts is a diplomat who seeks harmony and consensus. Understanding these differences is crucial for grasping the complexity of early Christianity and the revolutionary ideas that shaped it. Paul's legacy continues to inspire and challenge believers today, reminding us of the power of faith and the importance of inclusion in the Christian community.